In this video, we're going to add some rooms to this simple model here. Now, at first glance, you might be looking at this plan and thinking, well, there already are rooms here, but it's important to understand that having an enclosed space isn't the same thing as having a room. So in order for that to be recognized by Revit as being a room, we need to place something called a room element in that location. So on the architecture tab, there is this room and area panel here, and the room button is on that panel, and the keyboard shortcut is RM. So what I'm going to do is accept the default settings for this, which includes this setting right here, which is tag on placement. And I'm just going to move my mouse down into the view window, but not into the floor plan yet. So I'm off to the side here. And you're going to get this little blue rectangle that appears. So if I were to deselect tag on placement, you'd see that I would get just the blue rectangle without the label. And then if I reselect it, I'll get the label back again. Now, I think in most cases, when you're adding rooms, it's nice to see the labels. So having that tag on placement on is usually a pretty good idea. Now, I'm going to click out here in empty space. And when I do, that will actually generate a warning down here. Now, this is an ignorable warning. Remember, the yellow tinted ones in the corner, you can just click anywhere and they will dismiss. It says that the room is not a properly enclosed region. And I'm going to come back and talk about that in just a moment. So what do we mean by a properly enclosed region? Well, if we move into the plan somewhere, into an enclosed space like this bedroom in the upper left-hand corner, notice that the room now will conform to the shape of that enclosed space. And I can click to place the second room in that location. Now I'm going to click the Modify tool to cancel out of there, and notice that both rooms will disappear when I do. So rooms by default are invisible, and they only appear when you're either editing them actively or if you have them selected. So if I move my mouse into this bedroom area, notice that I can locate that X that runs through it, and I can click to select that room. Now, likewise, over here, even this one, which is not enclosed, I'm able to select if I can just find the edges or that X. When I select it, I want you to look over at the Properties palette and notice that it says not enclosed for both the area and perimeter. So now let me reselect the one here in the bedroom and we'll compare it. And notice that that one is generating the area and perimeter values because it is a properly enclosed room. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to make sure that your rooms are in a properly enclosed area. So if I want to, I can take this room that I have off to the side and I can actually pull it into the plan. So notice that there's a little move control right there in the middle. And if you click that and start to drag, you're able to pick this room up and move it. And it will actually start to conform to the spaces that you're moving it into. So I'm going to move it down here to this second bedroom and then let go. Now, when I do that, the default behavior is for the tag to stay where it was. So what I'm going to do is simply select the tag and uncheck this leader option, and the tag should now snap over to the location of the new room. Okay. All right. So I now have the two bedrooms located in their respective spaces. Let's go back to the room tool. And when we click the tool again, the room tool will always highlight any existing rooms to let you know where they are. And because it's an invisible element, this is handy because that way you won't accidentally place another room in the same location. If I were to do that, that generates a warning telling me that I've got a redundant room, and that's generally considered a bad idea. So I'm going to cancel that to not go through with creating that room. Now, what I'd like you to do in this pass is just focus on the enclosed spaces. So this little toilet room here, the small little linen closet beneath it, the toilet rooms here and the closet here. And notice that if you pay attention, you can get the tags to line up. Let's avoid this big space here for now. We'll come back and do that in a moment. Let's do each of the closets over here in the little utility room, and then maybe this closet right here. And then we're going to avoid this patio here for now as well. We'll come back to that momentarily also. So I'm going to click the Modify tool to cancel out. And now let's talk about how to subdivide a large open space. So whenever you have an open plan situation, it's possible that you might want that to be represented by more than one room. So to do that, you're going to use this tool first called Room Separator. And this is simply a model line that you can draw in any shape that you like. Now for this plan, we just need straight lines. That'll be suitable. So you just start where you want that line to go and just draw it like any other line. So I'm going to close off that little dining room right there. Press escape one time to break the chain. I'm going to close off this hallway here, press escape. I'm going to close off the kitchen here, press escape, and then maybe this little hallway right there, and press escape. So now I've taken that large space and subdivided it into multiple smaller spaces. And then I also want to indicate a patio out here. And because there are no walls defining this patio, that edge you see is actually a floor element. Floor elements are not going to bound the rooms in plan. Only walls would do that, or these room separator lines. I'm going to go ahead and surround that patio as well, just simply by tracing over it. So now I'll click the modify tool to cancel out of there. And now I'm ready to do the last pass of creating rooms and fill in all of those spaces. So now notice that it will sense each of these separately created spaces that I have just defined here using those room separators. And that includes this little patio on the exterior. So when you're done, you can click the modify tool there. And of course, now the next thing you'll notice is that all of the rooms just simply say room name. Okay, so the next thing I want you to see is where that information comes from. Now, the information is part of the room, not the tag. So I want to stress that. So I'm going to select one of these rooms here, like maybe the living room. Scroll down on the properties. And notice that the name says room name. You can select that and type in something else. And when you apply that, notice that that will fill in the tag for you. Now, if I deselect the living room and select its tag instead, tags are just hosted elements that are reporting the information that they find in their host. So if we look over here on the properties palette, notice that we don't see room name or room number because that information is coming from the room that it's hosted to. Now, another way that I can tell that it's hosted is it highlighted the room that it's connected to. Up here on the ribbon, we've got these hosting buttons. So there's lots of clues that I've got a hosted element. Now, having said all of that, it is possible to actually select a tag, click right on the label, and modify that. And the result of that modification is it looks as though you're editing the tag, but in reality, what you were doing is simply changing the name of the host element room that that tag belongs to. So it's really just a shortcut. And it's actually not that much different than what we've been doing with temporary dimensions all this time. So when we want to move the door, one of the options that we can do is select the door and then edit the dimensions. We're not really changing the dimensions. We're using the dimension to move the door, and that has the result of changing the dimension. So perhaps that sounds like semantics, but if you think of it that way, I think it's easier to understand what you're actually doing. So when I click on this label and change it, I'm not actually changing the tag. I'm changing the name of the underlying host room. So using either of those two methods, select the object and edit its properties, or do it directly in the tag. Go ahead and change all the remaining room names. And when you're done, it should look something like this. In this video, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the room bounding feature of rooms to show you a few scenarios that you are likely to run into when working with rooms. So the way that rooms determine their shape is because of a feature called room bounding. So when I select a room like this bedroom here, and the fact that it shapes around the surrounding geometry, that is the room bounding feature at work there. And most of your major geometric elements have a room bounding setting. So if I select walls, for example, all the walls will have a room bounding feature, and by default, it is turned on. We also have these room separator lines, which we added manually in an earlier video, and that's what allowed us to shape the living room, as an example, to a custom shape, even though there weren't walls in those locations. So that's another example of room bounding. Well, there are times when an element that is room bounding by default, you would prefer not to be room bounding. So for example, there's this little low height wall that's right here that's maybe dividing this space into two. And maybe I don't want that wall to influence the shape or the size of the room. So if that's the case, you can actually select that wall element and come over here to the properties palette and uncheck room bounding. Now, when you do, notice that the living room now flows right over that wall as if it wasn't even there. So that's a really simple example of customizing room bounding. But let's look at another one that's maybe a touch more practical. Suppose I zoom in on this lower bedroom down here in the corner. And as you can see, I selected it a moment ago. It's got this shape that goes around the closet. And then consequently, that means that we have a second room here that fills in the closet area. Now, that's perfectly fine, but maybe you decided that you don't need a separate closet room, and what you'd rather do is just let the area of the closet be considered part of the bedroom. If that's the case, then what you would want to do is select these two walls here, and I'll just do that with my control key, and then come over here to the properties palette and do what I just did a moment ago and turn off the room bounding for those two walls. When I apply that, it will generate a warning. And it's telling me that I now have multiple rooms in the same enclosed region. Well, what does it mean by that? Well, the bedroom and the closet are now both in the same enclosed space. So it's telling me that one of them is going to be considered redundant, and I could optionally delete that redundant room right here. The trouble is, I don't know which one it considers redundant. Is it the bedroom or the closet? So I want to make sure that I keep the bedroom and lose the closet. So I'm going to ignore this warning by clicking OK. And then that completes the modification. If I deselect the walls and come back and select the bedroom, you can see that it did consider the bedroom to be the dominant room, which is good. That's what I wanted. And notice that it now flows right over the closet and includes that area. If we move nearby where the closet was, notice that it shows a little differently now. So the redundant room is going to have this little dashed box indicator. And if you look over on the properties palette under dimensions, you will see that several of the entries there say redundant room now. Okay, so our closet is now redundant. What do we do about it? Well, let's just delete it. However, when you do, that will generate yet another warning. So this is where it can get a little frustrating. You're just trying to do something simple with your rooms and you're getting all these warnings, and that can be a little bit disruptive, which is why I wanted to go through this process with you. So it says a room was deleted from the model, but it still remains in the project, and you can use a schedule to deal with the problem. So what do they mean by that? Well, let me just click anywhere to dismiss that warning. And we're going to talk about schedule views in detail in a future video. But for now, let's just open up a schedule that already exists here in this project. So if you come over here to the project browser, scroll down, there's a schedules and quantities branch. And there's one right here called room finish schedule. So you just double click that like any other view to open it up. And a schedule is just a list of elements in the model. So as you can see here, we've got a list of all of the rooms. Now, I'd like to put that list side by side with the floor plan. So click back over to the floor plan view, come up here to the view tab and choose tile views. And then that puts those side by side. And then you can even change the width here between the two. So I don't need the schedule to be quite as wide as the floor plan. So I'm going to readjust the screen so I can see the whole floor plan over here. And then here's the schedule over here. Now, the way a schedule works is, as I said, it's a list of all the elements in the model, in this case, the rooms. And if you select an element, it will highlight the corresponding element in the model. So notice that I can select the bedroom and it highlights on screen there. Now, here's that closet that we just removed. And the clue in the schedule that it is a redundant room, or in this case now a non-placed room, is that it says not placed. Now, if I were to click over here and do undo so that the closet comes back again, notice that it will say redundant room there. So the reason it said not placed was because I had deleted it, and that made it a non-placed room. But now the schedule is giving us the feedback we need to understand that, right? So that's why it can be nice to have the schedule open. Now, before I remove this permanently, let me show you how you could add it back to the model if you needed to. Okay, so suppose I wanted to place that closet somewhere else in the model. What you would do is click over to the floor plan, go to architecture, click the room tool, And then by default, when you create rooms, you're creating a new room right here. However, notice that any non-placed rooms, and we only have one in this case, the closet, will be listed on here as well. So I could choose the closet from the list, and now I'm placing closet 110 in my model, and I could click somewhere to place it. Now, I don't actually want to place it, so I'm just going to click the Modify tool to cancel without doing that. But that's how you could place something that is non-placed back into the model. So you may be wondering why Revit bothers going through all of this. Why not just delete the room? Why is it giving me all this redundant room and non-placed room and everything? Well, if you consider the fact that rooms are invisible elements to begin with, it might be too easy for you to accidentally delete them. So by kind of adding this extra layer of steps here, it's sort of a fail-safe to prevent you from accidentally making mistakes that otherwise would be too easy to make. So whether you like this mechanism or not, I think it actually is in your best interest. And this is why they designed it this way, so that you don't end up deleting rooms that have a lot of data associated with them accidentally. So I do want to get rid of this closet after all. So what I'm going to do is click into the room schedule first, select the closet right here, and then on the ribbon that appears, there's a delete rows button here. You can click that to delete. It will warn you and say, are you sure? Yes, I am. I'll click OK. And now you'll see that closet has been removed from the list. Okay, so now we have actually deleted that room. Now I've got one similar scenario up here for the master bath. Maybe I don't want the master bath and the linen closet to be two separate rooms. I want the master bath to include the linen closet. Well, now that we know that we're going to have all those messages and warnings and everything, you could approach it a little differently. What you could do is select the linen closet here in the schedule first, delete it. That will warn you, just like it did a moment ago. Click OK. It removes from the model and the schedule. And now that means when I change the bounding elements for the master bath, it won't generate a warning. So we can easily come over here and select this wall, scroll down, turn off room bounding. Now the master bath flows into the linen closet space. But notice it's also flowing into this little shaft area here. So assuming that you don't want that, then there's one more step. We'll go to Modify. We'll use our Split Element tool. We're going to split that wall right at that location, then come back and select this portion and turn the room bounding back on again. And now we've got the master bath shaped the way that we want, and including the area of the linen closet. So those are some examples of manipulating room bounding and also just making you aware of some of the room bounding characteristics. So hopefully now you have a better understanding of how room bounding functions. And when you see some of these errors occur in your own projects, you won't be surprised by them and you'll know how to deal with them. In this video, I'm going to add room elements to this commercial plan, and the emphasis is going to be on controlling the numbering or the sequence of the rooms. Now, when you do this in a residential project, you're probably not as concerned about what sequence the rooms are numbered in. In fact, you might not even bother showing the numbers at all. But in a commercial plan, it's very common for each room to have a number. And in those cases, it's probably more important that the sequence follow some logical pattern. Now, in Revit, the only way that you're going to get it to number in a logical sequence is if you are strategic about the placement of your rooms. There are plenty of third-party tools that allow you to renumber rooms later, but I want to stress that there's nothing built into Revit that will easily allow you to renumber rooms based on any kind of pattern. You would literally just have to do them one at a time. So this is why I'm going to emphasize on strategy here rather than just taking advantage of some tool. Okay, so let's go to the architecture tab and we're going to click the room button. And if you watched the previous video, then we've already gone through the basic mechanics of placing rooms. Now, right here on the ribbon, there's this Place Rooms Automatically button. Now, we could have actually used that in the previous video for that residential layout, and it would have been perfectly fine there. But I wanted to show it to you here and show you why it's probably not a good idea in a plan like this. If I click this, it creates 15 rooms automatically, at which point you're probably like, well, that seems pretty good. Why wouldn't I just do that? But if you kind of zoom in here and you look around, the numbering doesn't make any sense at all. The chances that I would want the toilet rooms to be rooms 1 and 2, and then jump over to wherever room 103 is. I'm not even sure. There's the stairwell. It's 102. 103 is up here in this corner, and then we jump to 104. It's just totally random, okay? So it doesn't really make any sense at all. Now, if we had some sort of an automated way to quickly renumber the rooms, then maybe that would be perfectly fine. But in this case, I'm going to undo to remove all of those rooms and start again. So it will take a little bit more effort to place them one at a time, but I think it's worth it when you consider the benefit. So I'm going to go to my room tool, and I'm going to click where I want my first room to go. So to me, that makes sense to be here in this lobby. Now, in this template that we started with, that starts at room number 100. Assuming that you're satisfied with that number, you could continue. But let's say that I wanted to start at a different number, like maybe 101. You need to stop the command at that point, because the only way you can come back and renumber this room is if you're out of the room tool in the first place. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click right on the room number label and type in 101. Now, if I go back to the room tool, you will see that I'm able to click the next room and it will sequence to 102. So if you remember the way that Revit numbers things, we saw this with grid elements and some other elements as well, it always numbers in sequence. So that's why it's important to stop, change the number, and then continue from there. So now I'm going to make room 103 over here in this corridor. Maybe 104 is this stairwell here. Then I will do the toilet rooms next, 105 and 106. And then I'll just keep going across here. And then I'm going to pick up over in the conference room next. And then finally, the remaining offices. So then I'll click the Modify tool to cancel out. So now I've controlled the sequencing of all of those numbers. Now, what about the names? Well, we've talked about that in an earlier video. There's two ways to do it. You can do it right on the label by typing into the tag, or you can select the room itself. And in some cases, this might require the tab key, and then you can modify it here on the properties palette. So I'm going to rename all of the uniquely named rooms first, and then I've got a couple rooms that have the same name, such as this corridor here and this corridor here. You can do those together, but you can't do that with the room label. Where you do it is on the properties palette instead. So if you select both of those corridors, you can then type in that name and both tags will get that name. You can also make other kinds of selections. So I'm going to select all of those offices, go to filter, check none, and then pick just the rooms. Notice I have 6 of them. And then when I scroll down here, the number will vary, of course, but I can type in office and it will update all of those rooms accordingly. So now that I've named and numbered all of the rooms to my liking on the first floor, I want to reuse as much of this as possible on the second floor. So I'm going to go up to the L2 architectural floor plan, and I want to show you the next little interesting behavior about the way things number in Revit. So if I go to the room tool and I kind of click right here in the corridor, which is what I want to be room number 201, notice that it's not 201, it's room 115. So this is really important to understand, is that not only is it just picking up where it left off, it's not considering the level at all. So you might be assuming that it would do a 1 series rooms for the first floor and a 2 series room for the second floor, but it doesn't do that. Revit doesn't have any sophisticated rules about the numbering. It's just simply starting at a number and picking up from there. So just like we did on the first floor, when you move to the next floor, it's real important that you place the first room, renumber it. While I'm here, I'll go ahead and change the name. And then you can pick up from there. The next room I make will be 202 and then 203 and so on. But it also turns out that now I could select all of these rooms that I want to reuse, go to filter, check none. This time I'm going to choose rooms and room tags and click OK. So if you look at my properties palette, I have 10 elements selected. I'm going to copy those to the clipboard, go back to level 2, click the drop down for paste and choose paste aligned to the current view. And notice that the numbers have now sequenced correctly. This is 202, 203, 204. So they're in the same order, but they picked up where we left off at 201. And now you can see why it's so important that you create the first room on each floor and number it properly before you continue. So this does take a little bit more work to do it this way, but if you've got a plan where you want to control the sequencing of the numbering, I think that is the best way to do it. Now, as I said, there are third-party programs which would assist you in renumbering. You can go to the little shopping cart icon here to the Autodesk App Store and search for Renumber, and you'll come up with a number of plugins to Revit that are available for that purpose. Some of my favorites are by CTC Software and ID8 Software, so you can try out some of those, or there's several others as well.